Monsieur Anber.
Mr. Cassavant, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing good. So you're back in Montreal after a big weekend travel itinerary. And for those of you who wondered why calling Russ Anber wasn't on the air last week, it was a very busy week for fights. So we're recording early this week to kind of recap all the action that not only happened across the boxing world, but also two fights that you were involved with, two important fights on cool cards in two different states in 48 hours or 24 hours, correct?
Whoa, easy. Not just two different states. This is the first time in my life I've been involved in two fights in 24 hours on each coast, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. So Manchester, New Hampshire on Friday night and Las Vegas on Saturday night. That's on both was. I think that's pretty damn crazy if you ask me, but I wasn't the only one to do it that night. I got to admit, there was a lot of guys who were at the Manchester show who I then saw in Vegas. But yeah, that's. What
do you mean there was? What do you mean? There's a lot of guys who were in the Manchester show who were going.
Some of the boxing guys there. Mike Basil, famous Cutman, works with Andrade. He was there and then flew out to Vegas to work fights in Vegas, so he was there. Wayne McCullough was out in New Hampshire and also flew back out to Vegas. We were all on the same flight going back to Vegas.
Really? Oh, okay. That was pretty cool. And how the jet lag so far?
Nah, the jet lag going west is not a problem. It's within North America, it's never really a problem, the jet lag. Like you fall into sleep, no problem. Europe is a killer. Going there is a killer. For whatever reason, no matter how much you try to acclimatize yourself to staying awake, your body just won't sleep at the times it's supposed to sleep. And just when you think you've got it, and you say, yeah, I got it, I slept tonight, the next night you're up all night. It's stupid. I don't know why that happens.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, though, that there's much more of a, like you said, of a problem on the European side and going to Vegas, which is a 3-hour and pretty much of a breeze for you to come back into it and then have a bit of rest. So I don't know what you want to start with first, because the Vegas card, of course, with Terence Crawford and Shawn Porter involved in a heck of a bout.
Hell of a fun.
Main attraction of the weekend. But we got a ton of news also that's been happening across boxing. The fights you were in New Hampshire saw Demetrius Andrade with an excellent performance in the ring and even a better one, I thought, on the mic afterwards in the interviews. So, look, maybe start with Friday night. I don't know. What do you want to go with? What do you feel like starting
Why don't we just do it chronologically? That way my brain can work, as to where I was at what time and stay staying chronologically.
Porter, but you want to start with Friday night. Is that correct?
We might as well, yeah.
Perfect. So Friday night is a DAZN card in New Hampshire where we had a few big bouts, but two of them of special interest to us on this show. First of all, of course, the main event, Demetrius Andrade knocking out Jason Quigley. But the card you were in the corner of is Jessica Camara, who is fighting for one of the belts and the 140-pound. Actually, I think one or two belts, correct, because it's part of the 140-pound unification title in the women's division. The winner was going to face Chantel Cameron, who already has one of the other belts, pardon me. So it was Camara versus Reis, and it was on paper probably the toughest matchup, close to a 50-50 fight. And it ended up being a heck of a bout, a lot of courage. I just wanted your thoughts, Russ, off the bat, because Camara ends up losing a split decision, but there was some controversy on the scoring by a lot of people watching it as well.
It was a terrible decision. It was, I remember saying to Ian, we need the last round, like we got to seal it with the last round. And Reis had a good last round. We didn't end up winning the last round.
He had more than a good last round, Russ. In fairness, she really hurt Camara.
Yeah. It was a good, she won the last round. She won the last round. Let me get to my point. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how big she won it. It was irrelevant on the scorecard. It didn't even factor in, which was absurd. That two judges had a 7-3 win for Reis, and I thought that was unfair to everybody. I mean, I talked to Eddie Hearn, I talked to Frank Smith, we talked to various people who were at the fight, and if anything, you could say, okay, it was even going into the last round or one round up, and the last round decided it. Okay, you could live with something like that, but to say that the judges didn't even attend the fight and they just mailed in their ballot was just insane. That fight merited much more respect than the judges gave it. And the crowd, as soon as it was announced, were booing. As soon as Callie started to speak, they booed, not because they were booing her, but booing the decision. And when Jessica took the mic, they applauded. And I think it was fair to say that the general consensus was that Camara won the fight. And, it's just bad. I mean, Frank Smith, the first thing he says to me of Matchroom, he says, "This is just getting crazy. What's going on in boxing?" I said, "It's not even like it's not even like you're trying to show up. What are you watching?" And this is why I've said, and I put some things out on my.
Last time we were on the podcast, you talked about how you wanted judges to be accountable for their scorecards, to sit down and say, "This is why I gave it," not just effective. What were you seeing that was the effective aggression? Or I don't know if the 2-minute rounds came into play, right? Because I guess you just talked about this the last time we talked and we on the podcast, and now you're bringing it back again, I'm sure, as a big point of contention, right?
Exactly what I was about to say. Have those judges brought in and say, "Okay, how'd you come up with this? How did one judge come up with Camara as the winner, and you two guys were completely on the other side of the fence the other way?" And let's say it would have been a fight that was 7-3 in favor of Callie Reis. How did you come up with Camara as the winner? You have to be accountable for your work. You have to be accountable for your scorecards. And it's just not fair to the fighters, to the effort they put in, to the crowd who pay their money to buy a ticket and watch a fight and expect to see the so-called professional boxing judge, because that's what they call themselves. "I'm a professional boxing judge." Well, show how professional you are and present a professional card, a professional verdict. And that's not being done again.
Well, is that also to blame that boxing has everything kind of decided by the jurisdictions of the state instead of having kind of an official pool of judges that could go across the country, and we know these are the best judges? And right now you're going to New Hampshire. I mean, how many big fights do they have in New Hampshire in a year?
But if I'm not mistaken, the judges were from New York. So
that's the title fight they can bring in from other states. But did you have a chance to talk at all, like who these judges were, what their qualifications for, or no?
Yeah, no. I knew all the judges. I knew all their names. I knew all their names. Don't know them personally, but I knew all their names of who they were. That's why I knew right away they're from New York. And I said to Ian McKillop, when we were standing on the ring apron before the fight started, I said, we're not going to get a decision here. Before the fight, I told Ian McKillop that.
Why? What made you think that?
Because Callie Reis is from New York. All the judges were from New York. The referee was from New York, who Mercanti did a good job. I can't complain. He did a good job in refereeing the fight. He stayed out of the way, which was wonderful. They let both those fighters get on and have a great war. But I said, it's just stacked against us. There's no presence. Like we felt so B-side. It was crazy. We were only two in the corner. The other team had a full group of a whole posse in the corner. We were two. So it just felt like we were brought in just to appear, show up. Cards are already rendered. Decisions are already done. Chantal Cameron is ringside, ready to be introduced to meet Callie Reis for the title. It just seemed so scripted and played out.
You weren't sure. You're not saying that after the 10th round, because of the way that round ended, did you not think that was going to be close? Because I thought I saw you in the corner on the zone, kind of go to Jessica. That last round made it close.
That's what I thought. And I thought maybe if that would have been the round that sealed the deal for Callie Reis, I'd have accepted it, But it wasn't. And it's not so much the decision of the fight that Callie Reis won. If Callie Reis had won 6-4 on all cards, I'd have lived with it. I could have lived with it. If it would have been 5-5, or one of them scores at 5-5, another one 6-4. Right. But at 7-3, you didn't bother watching the fight. You didn't bother showing up. You had your scorecard in already. You were 6-3 Callie Reis after 9 rounds. That's not the reality of the fight.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing also we got to credit, both of women fought and made it one of the more entertaining bouts of the evening. And I think we're just seeing more and more of these competitors. They're willing to fight the best. In women's boxing, it seems like a bit more right now, maybe because it's relatively new that they're in the spotlight. and maybe in a few years from now, they'll start cherry picking a bit more their opponents, similar to what we're seeing on the men's side for many of the fighters in the top 10, if you will. But the other thing is Jessica Camara. She showed a lot of professionalism. I thought it was good for both fighters at the end. Like this type of fighters that you're going to want to see them again in action, regardless of the scorecards.
Absolutely. You know, it was a great fight. Both of them showed a lot of courage. I think one of the reasons why the fight also looked so close was because of the 2-minute rounds. And
of course,
3 minutes, you know, that extra minute allows somebody to gain dominance in a round, because at the end of the day, when you think about it, if one fighter wins a minute of a round and another fighter wins the other minute of a round, it's a 50-50 round.
That's
so
right.
Technically, like I like to do, there are rounds that could be a draw. That third minute sometimes can offer you the deciding factor in who won that round. Would they have been able to fight at that pace for an extra 10 minutes, if you will, an extra minute? That's tough. It's a long time. So hard to say, but it certainly brings in action, because there is only the 2 minutes when you're ready to fight. But I think both those women would have probably fought the same way over 10 rounds until they start to understand how it is that you have to pace yourself over 3 minutes, how you have to fight a 3-minute round the way men do. So hard to say if it's good, bad, or not, but I think it's certainly something we're going to have to explore. And unless there's a medical fact, which I don't know, as to why women can't fight a 3-minute round, it would be interesting to see how they would handle that. It would be interesting to see somebody like a Jessica Camara and Callie Reis fight 3-minute rounds, because it was a hell of an entertaining fight. I got to give them that. I mean, there was a few technical mistakes made, and stuff you don't want to see somebody doing. But boy, what they lacked in technical perfection, they more than made up in heart and desire, because they stood there and went at it. I mean, they really threw some leather. It was really entertaining. I was proud to be in the corner that night. And
as a Cutman, you had a big cut to deal with late in the bout. Did you? What did you make? What did you assess of that cut?
No, the cut was no issue, because it happened in the 10th round. So I never had to work. I never had to work it. It was in the 10th round, and then the fight ended. What we did have to deal with was Jessica had suffered an injury in training, and her nose had bled profusely in training. And so she had to lay off sparring for a while, and then, to let the nose heal. And it started to bleed again in the fight. But I thought we did a good job in controlling the blood, and I don't think it hampered her too much in the fight. It was a great night of boxing. I'm proud that Ian asked me to do that, and I'm glad that the first bout that I could.
No, sorry, Russ, but Ian Phillip, being the trainer and former professional fighter.
Jessica. Yeah, asked me to be in the corner, and it was a pleasure to work with him, and I hope I can do it again. He called a great fight in the corner. He's a professional. He understands the fight game. He gets what goes on in a corner, and I think both of us complimented each other in the corner, and I think we did the best we could to get what we could out of Jessica. And I thought we caused the upset. I thought we won the fight, but it's boxing, isn't it?
Last thing on this bout is that I was happy to see that despite the judging, the commission at least didn't warn you for all that Vaseline you put. Because at one point I said, "Oh, Russ, you might get in trouble here with the amount of Vaseline you were putting on Jessica for some of these rounds there. You were almost giving her a different shade of color with the amount of Vaseline you were putting on."
That's not fair, and I'll tell you why. Because she has a darker complexion, right? And the Vaseline is always going to show up more on a black fighter or fighter with darker complexion, because it's clear. On white skin, you don't notice it as much. I do not put any more on her than I've put on anybody else, but it shows up on darker skin, especially with the sweat. You see it. So
my point being is that you've been warned before, by unjustified or not, by the commissions and the refs. You've said this before, this point of contention of yours, that they get on you sometimes, or they get on other corners for putting too much Vaseline, and you say it's a non-issue.
They get on sometimes, even if it's not too much, they say it's too much. That's just silly why they say it. But it clearly makes absolutely no difference. And like I said, I didn't put any more on her and she's so small. I didn't put any more on her. She had no cuts. There was no reason to put anything on extras. But it certainly does show up on someone with a darker complexion.
All right, so now we look forward to seeing Jessica still be in contention at 140. She deserves, obviously, maybe, who knows, the winner of Reis and Chantel Cameron, whenever that fight takes place. They could end up fighting Jessica Camara as their first defense. The fans would love to see it. Now, on the main event side, Andrade, who many people in boxing seem to be a polarizing figure. Now, Chris Mannix on DAZN said something that I think pretty much everybody in the boxing community kind of said, what are you talking about? When he said Andrade versus Jermell Charlo is the biggest fight, quote unquote, you can make in boxing. It's an interesting fight, of course. I don't think it's the biggest, and I don't think anybody would disagree with the fact that besides Chris Mannix, there's other bigger fights that can happen. But Andrade was very vocal. He took care of business. People want to say, oh, look, he only defeated someone who didn't have much recognition and pedigree in Jason Quigley. But I think Andrade is just a tough out for anybody in the middleweight division, and he deserves the big opportunity. I don't know if you had a chance to speak with him or if you saw the fight up close, of course. Your thoughts on his performance and his comments after the bout.
Now, I wanted to ask you what the comments were after the bout, because I didn't get to see that. I mean, I was flying out. I had to leave the hotel at 5:30 in the morning. So
that must
what's that?
You must have loved that, right?
Oh, yeah, it was great. I had to drive to Boston. I had to drive an hour to Boston. So believe me, I wasn't in any, I didn't have any inkling as to what he said after the fight. So I would like you to fill me in on that. But before you do, what I will tell you is he's so dangerous. When they, throughout history, there have been certain boxers there because of their style, because of their ability, especially usually if it's a good defensive fighter that you can't hit. There are fighters that are ducked. And he is a fighter that is ducked. He is somebody who he doesn't bring the monetary value to the table. But he's a hell of a fighter and has been throughout his amateur career, right through to the Olympics till now. There is nobody in the world that you could put in there with him and say, easy for this guy to get Andrade out of there. Nobody. I don't care who it is, whoever it is. If you beat him, you're in a tough, hard fight to beat Demetrius Andrade. There's no doubt about it. He is maybe the most ducked fighter in boxing today.
Yeah, and I know some people get kind of on Andrade for his style, and some people don't like his personality, but I think he's a great communicator. And I think, look, he's a boxer who has the ability to then knock you out when he sees vulnerabilities. I think, he's not the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world at the moment, but I think, like you said, to think he can now defeat the winner of Triple G Murata, which is going to happen at the end of the year, to think he couldn't defeat Jermell Charlo, to think he couldn't defeat even, or at least maybe not defeat, but he could definitely, I think, pose a serious threat to Canelo. I think he deserves, I don't get kind of why Andrade still gets some slack by some in the boxing community.
I don't either. And I know him on a personal level as well. And I know he's somebody who works very hard at what he does. Unless there's something I don't know about the guy, I feel bad because he's that good and he deserves better. He deserves a better. I don't know if it's because he's not hanging with the big guys, with the American-based promoters, that he signed with Matchroom. I don't know if that's a deal, and they're trying to freeze him out. They get the narrative out there that, oh, he's boring. Oh, he doesn't fight good. Oh, he has no charisma. Oh, he can't do. Oh, he brings no money. Get that narrative out there, because I experienced that. When Otis Grant was fighting here in Montreal. They go, who's he? Oh, he doesn't draw. He doesn't sell. Can't sell tickets. They put that narrative out there to avoid giving us the fights that we wanted locally, and that was probably the beginning of when Quebec fighters started ducking other Quebec fighters. So Otis Grant never got to fight any of the Quebec stars, the middleweight stars that were around during that time. Never fought any of them, and had to do his career on the road and go and win a world title on the road because the local fighters wouldn't fight him. So the same thing that I feel with Andrade, you put the narrative out that, no one wants to see him. He's not good. But if he was with Top Rank, if he was with somebody else, if he would be with a high profile manager, maybe that narrative would be different. I don't know. But when I look at it as a boxing trainer, I look at the kid and say, can he fight? And I got a guy in his weight class, I'm saying, oh, we got to avoid this guy because this guy's trouble.
Yeah, and he's 33 years old. He deserves the big bout next. I really hope. And he gave kind of pressure in the ring also to his promoter, Eddie Hearn, saying, Eddie, you got to make the fight happen. Fans, you got to demand that the best fight the best. Hopefully we see Andrade. And one name that Andrade and the fans kind of got upset with was his involvement when Canelo defeated Billy Joe Saunders, and Andrade crashed a press conference. And of course, Canelo's now infamous English, you want payday, you want payday. When he told Andrade that, and people kind of didn't like that involvement, but Andrade trying to do something here. And he's saying that Canelo now going, and that was the other big news of the week, non-fight related. We thought maybe here's Canelo. Who does he fight? Does he fight Triple G next? Does he possibly fight David Benavidez next to make his first defense of the undisputed super middleweight crown? Does he move up to light heavyweight and fight Arthur Beterbiev, the fight that the diehard boxing fans want to see? Well, no, here we go at the WBC convention. It turns out he wants to go down to cruiserweight because he's already defeated Sergey Kovalev at light heavyweight. So now he wants to go to cruiserweight to fight Makabu for the WBC cruiserweight title. And at first I thought, like a lot of people, this is just a rumor, but it looks like it's going to happen whenever Canelo decides to get back into the ring, because he wants the challenge of winning another belt in another weight class that's completely out there. And this opens up a can of worms for a ton of different situations and issues here. Russ, I want to get your first take on, do you think do you think Canelo is doing the wrong thing by not staying in the division where all the big name opponents are and moving up to cruiserweight to fight a relative unknown?
I think he's proving that he calls the shots as to what he wants to do. He wants to fight a cruiserweight, win a cruiserweight title. A guy who started his career at 147 pounds has never won a cruiserweight title, so I think he thinks he can beat the guy to win the title, WBC title. He's loyal to the WBC. He's going to try it. But he's not, he's saying, you know what, though, I'm still want to be WBC super middleweight champion, so I might come back down. That's always been, boxing history has proven that's been a downfall to a lot of fighters who have moved up in weight class and then come back down to their previous weight class, and they were never quite the same. Case in point, Sugar Ray Leonard. And I think that's very dangerous that him doing that. But he can't stay at cruiserweight. I can't see him staying there at cruiserweight simply for his size. But I do believe he certainly has power to do so. I certainly think he has the power that will carry up, especially with the added weight. But I think it just proves that Canelo is the goose that laid the golden egg, and he's going to call the shots and do what he wants. And everybody else is going to say, okay, if you want to do that, then that's fine. Go ahead. And they're going to go and they're going to hold his title there, and that's it. But that's why we allow them to do this, because the organizations create these so-called interim titles. So, while this guy is off doing the thing he wants to do, but if the rules were, hey, if you're moving up and you don't defend your title, we're stripping you, you're going to have to come back and re-win it, then the decisions could be different. But that's not the case. He's the guy that brings the money to the table, and everybody's just going to do what he says. That's what that proves.
I also think that two things can be true, Russ, because a lot of the fans were looking at it, well, Canelo's great on hand to do this challenge. Others were saying, look, he's completely avoiding the big fights we want to see at super middleweight or light heavyweight. Mark Ramsey and John Scully and the team that you work with, Arthur Beterbiev, look at it as a direct, listen, he doesn't want to move one weight class up to fight the beast, Beterbiev. He's being strategic here. And I think Canelo, with the amount of fights, 60 pro fights, fighting since the age of 15, let's stop this narrative that he's afraid of anybody, okay? I don't believe that for 1 second. What I do believe it can be true, though, is he can look at it and say, okay, now I've conquered the super middleweight division. Who are the big names out there? I either got to fight Triple G a third time. I either got to fight maybe an Andrade, a Charlo, a Benavidez, or Beterbiev. All of those are more difficult challenges than any of my previous bouts at super middleweight have been, whether it's Planch, Saunders, name it. So I think he looks at it and says, I'm the money guy. Many of these other fighters don't bring money besides Triple G to the table. So screw it. I'm going to go and do something else that's historic. That's the spin on it. And I'm not going to give these guys a payday for the risk that it involves, because they are much tougher fights than what he's had this last year on paper.
And everything you just said goes back to, I call the shots.
You're allowed to be disappointed as a fan that Canelo doesn't choose to fight the big names we want to see now. But at the same time, Canelo has done more than many fighters pound for pound have
100%.
done.
100%.
So that's 100%. Where it become kind of spoiled, right? Because Canelo did all these conquering the belts. He fought 4 times in a year. And now we're seeing a little bit of the Mayweather playbook and picking and choosing his opponents when he's the big cash earner.
And he wants to be involved in title fights. And I mean, I think it's a hell of a handicap to give somebody, say, you know what? Okay, I'm going to fight a guy. Okay, he didn't choose to fight, Usyk at cruiserweight. He chose.
That's the one people think now. They think, what about Usyk then?
Yeah, but he didn't choose to fight him. He kind of like handpicked the guy he wanted, but he's still going to be giving up. It's cruiserweight is still cruiserweight. It's still a big, strong man in front of you, albeit slower. But it's the same way like when Roy moved up to the heavyweight division. Roy didn't move up to the heavyweight division. There was talk of it happening, but it never happened for him to fight Tyson. But he ended up fighting John Ruiz. That's the guy he picked to win the heavyweight title. So you cannot be upset at what Canelo's doing, but it does go to show that he calls the shots.
Yeah, but Russ, this is the last thing I'm going to say about the Canelo situation is that based on what we saw with Roy Jones when he defeated John Ruiz, and then he decided to drop all that weight and that muscle, and that's when he started to get the knockout losses at light heavyweight. That's why some fans have speculated, and I think this makes sense, Canelo wins the cruiserweight title with WBC, and because he's like this with the WBC and Mauricio Suleiman, he goes after the heavyweight belt for Usyk, and then it's retirement. It's not going anytime in the future back down at his age and his experience level.
Wow, that's quite a prediction there, Mr. Casablanca.
Doesn't it make sense to you, knowing what we know? Why would he go back down to light heavyweight to fight Bertabayev? Wouldn't it make more sense for him to then say, I'm going to do the even more historic thing, become a Mexican heavyweight champion, and I'm going to go after Usyk, who was a former cruiserweight, so not much that difference in weight between Usyk and Makabu.
And they could probably get a catch weight. They could probably do it at a catch weight.
Well, Canelo can weigh at 190, right? Or to be a heavyweight, I'm not sure what the rules are. I got to check. I think you got to weigh in at least at 201, correct?
Well, not now. Now the WBC has changed that because of the new Bridgerweight class. Oh, he could move up and fight Bridgerweight as well, right? He could move up and fight after that. After he goes to, he can go to Bridgerweight, so which is right after cruiser. So it's possible.
I think that's more likely, and I think for him to fight Bertabayev, it would, because he looks at it probably as saying, you know what, Arthur, as great of a fighter he is, he doesn't bring the big money. And why am I going to give him the payday and risk getting that tough fight of, that inside possible power of Bertabayev? Let me try and get these historic titles at cruiserweight or heavyweight. Listen, you heard, I'm just saying, I would not be shocked if we see that possibility. I think it makes more sense than for him to go back down, or he'll just retire after the cruiserweight belt. He's got enough money, that's for sure.
Well, bookmark this, because if that prediction comes true, that you're going to be the one to have said it first. So not bad.
Yeah, after your prediction of Usyk winning the heavyweight titles years ago, right? So hopefully,
that's right.
The Canelo to Usyk matchup to heavyweight down the road would be great. Speaking of big fights, at least a big one on Saturday, you were with Janibek and the undercard, one of the top prospects right now in boxing, probably now established himself as a contender. He was on a stacked undercard. You want to treat Janibek's performance, and he's another fighter that I think a lot of people now are naming only from his first name. No, people don't even bother. Can you pronounce his last name, Russ?
Alimkhanuly. It's very easy. Alimkhanuly. It's not hard, and I'm baffled as to how people the ring announcers cannot. You can read it phonetically, exactly like it's spelled, Alimkhanuly, and they cannot say his name. I don't understand it. Jimmy Lennon can't say it. Mark Chinook can't say it. They cannot say his name, but if you just read the letters, they're there. I don't understand. But it's nice to be a guy like the one-name guy, Janibek, and we call him Johnny. When we're yelling his good Johnny, we'll yell those instructions. I said to Buddy, I said to Buddy McGirt a while ago, I said, if this kid would have come along in the 1940s, in the 1940s or 50s, and was, a foreigner coming to America to turn pro, and so many guys changed their names when they started fighting, from their original immigrant names, if you will, to make it more Americanized. I said, this name would have been changed to, his name would have been Johnny Beck. That would have been his name, Johnny Beck. That's what they would have called him, right? They would have just split it up. They laughed, and but that's the way we call him. And yeah, he had a heck of a fight beating Hassan Ndam. And Ndam is a courageous guy, boy. I'll tell you, I thought he was going to get out of there early, but he was in fact, I think too courageous for his own good, that his corner should have got him out of there a lot sooner, and they didn't. But good rounds that Janibek got in, and with that win, he made himself the mandatory to Demetrius Andrade. So,
talk about Andrade not getting a break, though. I mean, that might be a difficult fight to make with the network affiliations as well. But 5 straight knockout wins for Janibek, who looks to be more and more seasoned as a decorated amateur, but now in the professional ranks, I think he's getting better with each fight. You also like this demeanor. How do you get along with Janibek and Buddy there in the corner for that fight?
Oh, great. A pleasure to work with them. Great. He's learning, gets better at that. I mean, there are still things he has to learn. And it's very rare, save for Loma. Even Usyk still had to learn his craft. But no matter how good you are, there are certain things you have to experience and learn inside of a professional boxing ring. There's that when they talk about that experience, when they talk about that know-how, the subtleties that the layman doesn't see, these are still the things that Janibek has to deal with. Right now, he wins on ability, he wins on skill, he wins on his amateur background. He's gifted for sure. But there are certain things as a pro you have to know, and nothing can make you know that without being in the ring. You have to do it in the ring, and that's where the seasoning comes in. That's why it was so commonplace, especially back in the day. No matter how great you were, Sugar Ray Leonard, 3 years before you moved him into a title shot, fighting guys, building it up, working him all the time. This is the thing, because they wanted you to have that experience. Now guys are fast-tracked very quickly into important fights, and they win. But you could see they don't have that seasoning and that schooling that you're supposed to have when you have 25 fights instead of having 15. There's a big difference.
Yeah, it's a great point. Look forward to seeing what happens next. Even if the Andrade fight, I hope kind of for Andrade, he doesn't have to fight Janibek right away, and maybe he can work around that. But we'll have to wait and see. Janibek has definitely a bright future ahead of him, and he'll be involved in some bigger fights coming up in 2022. And then the main card, there's two things here for that show. First of all, Falcao against Volny. I just want to address it because Patrice Volny might be the best Canadian Quebec fighter that not many people know about. He doesn't have much of a personality in terms of seeking the media attention. He's got a great personality when you get to know him, but it's not something that for him, I think he's very vocal about. And Falcao, who has the amateur background, but I think we saw flaws in Falcao that Volny may have been able to exploit, especially as the fight was going to go along. But it ends with a cut and a technical decision.
Decision.
You mean the scorecard should have been to Volny's favor even at that point?
No, the fact that they allowed the fight to go to a technical decision based on the cut, which was not bleeding, and could have continued, that they allowed him to quit in the corner and bail and still give him the decision is wrong. The ruling is...
So Falcao kind of maneuvered the rules knowing that if he cannot continue due to an accidental clash of heads, it goes to the scorecards, but he kind of overdid it. You're saying he acted a little bit of knowing that he might have been ahead on the cards.
That's right, because the rule is, in the event that a fight is stopped as a result of an accidental headbutt, a cut created by an accidental headbutt, you would go to the scorecards, right? And the fighter ahead would win. That would be it. The fact that the commission allowed it to stop there instead of saying, no, you can continue. If we have to stop the fight later, if the cut starts bleeding and it gets too bad and we stop it later, we'll go to the scorecards. But right now you can fight. The doctor examined them, boom, boom, boom. Yes, okay. The cut was, except on the other eye, was the exact same cut that Usyk had against Joshua. Exact same cut. The fight went on. There was no reason to have to stop that bout. He wasn't bleeding into his eye. Jessica had more blood in her eye in the 10th round than Falcao did. And he was saying, oh, no, I can't. Oh, it hurts. Oh, no, I can't. he bailed on it, knowing that they're going to go to the cards, and they shouldn't have. The judges, the commission should have said, no, you have to box the same way, like with a low blow. We gave you the time, we checked it, it's not bleeding. Fight.
Do you think that becomes a tricky situation for the commission and liabilities if something happens to Falcao after the fact, after he was forced, after he says I think I get what you're saying, but I think for the commissions in this day and age, it's a slippery slope, no, with the safety of fighters being talked about.
Yeah, probably. I think that's probably at least the reason they'll give you. But
Falcao, you think in his heart, that Falcao
had no desire of continuing whatsoever. No desire of. He was looking to get out of that as quick as he could. And Volny was starting to come on. Volny was starting to, okay, and you're only at round 6. So I mean, you're in a fight. You're in a position to win now. This is not like you're terribly behind. You know, Volny's starting to work. Falcao couldn't get Volny out of there. Volny's now starting to fight back. As soon as he saw that, no, I can't see, I can't cut. No, he was ready to bail. It's sad actually that he has that kind of that result of that fight is going to put him in a mandatory position for Golovkin.
Right, and we'll see what happens with the Golovkin-Murata fight, which will be
of course
a match end of the year. But there's a lot of prospects going up and coming fighters in the middleweight division. Hopefully, Volny still gets a chance to get a meaningful fight because he doesn't deserve, to go all the way back down in the rankings based on that fight.
I told Eric Boulanger he should protest the decision. Not that it would maybe do anything, but he certainly could file an appeal. Saying, look, the guy was in position, in a condition to continue. The cut was not bleeding. He was in a position to continue, and he's the one who stopped. It wasn't the doctor who looked at the cut and said, "Oh, that's it. I'm stopping it. It's terrible." No, he was the one complaining. I can't. The doctor wasn't the one complaining.
Right.
So that's what bothers me. It wasn't the doctor who stopped. I mean, he had to do what the fighter said, but the doctor didn't look at the cut and say, "Oh boy, this is too bad. We got to wave this off. He can't continue." He didn't say that at all. It wasn't even bleeding. Falcao bailed. Quit.
All right. One guy who definitely didn't quit in the main event was Shawn Porter against Terence Crawford.
What a fight.
And again, Shawn Porter, throughout his career, has been in entertaining fights. When you look at his pedigree, I think his career will be looked at even more fondly after the fact, in retrospect, than it was at the time. I don't think Shawn Porter, for me, theoretically, Russ, was my favorite style inside the ring. I don't think it's necessarily what I would teach in terms of fundamentals, but his attitude, his desire, and had I known that, I think in his mind, he knew he was going to retire if he lost this fight. You saw by the way he went about this bout against Crawford. If I'm going to lose, I'm going to go out on my shield. I'm not going to try to make this a technical bout and go to a close scorecard without much happening. I'm going to press. I'm going to bring out the best in Crawford. And at one point, I look forward to hearing your take on the scorecards, but it looked like Porter would rock Crawford at times. It looked like he was close to pulling the upset, but ultimately Terence Crawford gets his biggest win of the welterweight career that he's had so far. So you up close and personal seeing that fight must have been pretty good.
It was great. And, I was watching with Buddy McGirt, and Buddy's sitting there saying, Bud has to stay there. He can't let this guy chase him around the ring. Bud's going to have to stay there and go toe-to-toe with him and let him. And I said to Buddy, and his skill set would allow him to do that. Terence Crawford has an outstanding skill set. Like his jab, his right hand, his left hand, his hooks, whichever side, are very, very proficient. He throws them well. He throws them hard. He's precise. He's a sharpshooter. He's a sniper. He's going to have to do that. And when he started to fight back, you could see that he was catching Porter well. And then Porter would kind of like come back with 4 or 5 punches, and kind of offset. And he succeeded in keeping Crawford really off balance a lot in terms of, like the punches, where are they coming from? All kinds of angles. And I thought Porter was ahead going into the last round. 1 point maybe, like it wasn't huge, but I remember in my head, I'm scoring and I was texting saying, "Oh yeah, another round for Porter. Oh, another round for Porter." So I had more rounds for Porter than I did for Crawford. And
Crawford was ahead, though, officially by 2 points on one card and 1 point on
and
two.
1 point on the other. So it was still very, very close. It was still very close, the fight. And, for whatever reason, the 2 knockdowns were going to hurt him badly. Even if the fight had been allowed to continue that late into the fight, that fight would have been scored a 10-7 round, which now would have put him 3-2, 5 points ahead on one card and 4 points ahead on the other, which means that, he'd be 4 points behind going into the last 2 rounds, which means Porter would have needed a knockout, or he would have had to score a knockdown in each of the remaining 2 rounds to get a draw.
That's right. That's right.
Draw.
So what did you think of the stoppage from his father and trainer?
Look, I'm never going to criticize somebody for doing what he thinks is best for his son. I'm especially often you have the fathers who don't stop it soon enough. It's worse. But I guess he figured that was the best his son could give. That's where they were, and he wasn't going to let Crawford, who you can put down not only as one of the best fighters in boxing pound for pound, but one of the best finishers in boxing today. I guess Kenny didn't want his son exposed to that. And I know that Shawn wasn't hurt, because you could see by his reaction on the second knockdown, he was more mad than he was hurt. And he knows that the 2 knockdowns were going to cost him severely on the scorecard. But it would be interesting to talk to Kenny and ask him why he did what he did, and to see how Shawn felt about that. But he certainly didn't react the way Wilder did, if you will. He respected what his father did, and that's it. His father calls the shots, and that's his son. And he made the decision to stop the fight. And then Porter announces his retirement after the fight, and Porter's going to go on. He's got a great personality. He's got $1 million smile. He's articulate. He's a classy individual. His broadcasting has become great. They've used him on a lot of the PBC shows. So he certainly has a future and will be around boxing for a long time to come. And more importantly than anything, he has the respect of the boxing world and of the boxers themselves. They all say, Shawn, oh man, that guy put you in a war. He's right. Got the respects of everybody. So not a lot of fighters can leave the game with that kind of, recognition and respect from peers the way Shawn did.
Let's look at what we know about boxing in this day and age and how difficult it is for the best to fight the best, right? Look at this stretch from Shawn Porter starting in 2013, all in the welterweight division. He fought Devin Alexander, Paulie Malignaggi, Kell Brook, Adrian Broner, Keith Thurman, Andre Berto, Danny Garcia, Yordenis Ugas, who looks even better now based on Ugas' win against Pacquiao, Errol Spence, and then Terence Crawford with a fight with Sebastian Formella in between. It was kind of a stay busy bout, but I mean, that's a who's who name of opponents that Porter fought, despite sometimes the contract situations and the networks. He found a way to get it done. So he's going to be probably, Russ, a borderline Hall of Famer, right? When it's all said and done in 5 years from now.
100% he's in the Hall of Fame.
You think it's 100% locked that Porter? Okay, because he lost the biggest fights really. When you look at Thurman, Spence, and Crawford, he's 0-3 in those bouts, but very super close bouts and wars for all 3 guys.
I guess it's going to be a case, like I've always said, there's going to be worse guys that are going to be in the Hall and better guys that are not.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. And we'll have to wait and see. But regardless, Shawn Porter, a heck of a career. We have a few minutes left, Russ. So in terms of Terence Crawford and where he goes from here, I mean, he had that big win. People want to see the Errol Spence fight, of course. That's the big fight people want to see. Maybe it happens now that the contract promotional situation is kind of up in the air with Crawford. He's 34 years of age. One thing I noticed again on Saturday, I don't know if you agree, but I find he's much better fighting out the southpaw stance than the orthodox stance. Similar to Hagler, this insistence of wanting to fight orthodox, but he should stick to southpaw. I don't know if you agree.
Way better as a southpaw. I said that to Buddy as well. I said, what advantage is it to him to fight as a right-hander? All he's doing is leveling the playing field. When he fights southpaw, the playing field is here. When he goes right-handed, he takes away the slight advantage that he may have, and he's far more effective as a southpaw than he is as a right-hander. But that said, did you see the press conference after with what he said, that basically his mind is made up and that he's leaving Top Rank? So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes.
But so if, let's say, he does fight against Spencer, so I got a lot of arguments. You have the Spence crowd, you have the Crawford crowd. Do you have a strong feeling either way if both men were to fight next? Who has the advantage?
I like Crawford. I like Crawford solid. I like him strong. And Spence surprised me. He left the arena very quickly after the fight. You know, he didn't stay up there in the ring or stay at ringside. He didn't have anything to do with that. Like listen, when you want to make a fight happen, you'll make it happen. Wilder wanted the Fury fight to happen. He made it happen. Porter wants fights to happen. He makes it happen. When you want fights to happen, you make them happen. And if Spence wanted the fight, it would happen. That's how I feel.
Did you get a chance to talk at all to the Crawford camp while you were in Vegas?
No. Listen, let me give you my itinerary. Right. Left the hotel in Manchester, New Hampshire at 5:30 in the morning. Got to the airport at 6:30. Returned the car rental. Got on the flight to Las Vegas. Landed in Vegas. Picked up the car rental. Went to my office. Picked up my bucket and all the stuff that I needed for the fight that night. Went to Mandalay Bay. Checked in. I was in my room at 12 minutes after 2 in the afternoon, and we met in the lobby with Janibek's team at 4 o'clock. Did I really have time to do anything?
You had a 2-hour window? No, but I'm saying, don't you share locker rooms sometimes with other main fighters, of course, or were they all separate because it's a big show?
He's the main event. He had his own room. He's not sharing with anybody, you know, as you well know. So, no, I didn't get a chance to speak to him.
Well, good. I look forward to seeing what, look, he's 34 years old. It would be great to see him fight Spence next. If not, maybe he goes up to junior middleweight. I don't know, but there's going to be some opportunities for Crawford, who still cements himself as one of the best fighters pound for pound. And heck of a performance. I think he kind of, but I like what you said about the fact that he's a finisher, because he wins a lot of his bouts by knockout. He's got 29 out of 38 wins, but he's not necessarily the aggressor. He just will pick you apart, though, if you do come at him.
Yeah.
So it makes
and I was actually surprised at the stoppage, because I said, Porter's a hard guy to get out of there. You know, he's a hard guy. And he succeeded in hurting him and getting him out of there. That was enough to prompt Kenny to stop the fight, you know, Kenny Porter to stop the fight. So, you know, there's something about Terence that's very special. And when you speak of pound for pound fighters, the reason I like to include Crawford in that is because when you look at all the aspects of boxing, as I've often told you before, quality of punches, variety of punches, the ability into throwing them as perfect as possible, Terence Crawford possesses those abilities.
Couldn't disagree with what you just said. Look forward to seeing what happens with Crawford next year. Final thoughts, Russ, on tonight's podcast. We've got about a minute or so. What's your itinerary like these next few weeks here, as there seems to be a lot of boxing shows since November till the end of the year? Yeah,
I'm super busy. I mean, I don't have a weekend where I'm at home, unless you consider the Better BF fight at home. But I've got Joshua Frazier making his professional debut, former national team member, supposed to have gone to the Olympics, making his professional debut December 4th in Toronto, Madison Square Garden with Lomachenko on the 11th, Bell Center with Better BF on the 17th, Christmas the following week, and then January is looking like a very busy month for me as well. Callum Johnson is fighting Joe Smith in Verona, New York. I'll be there, and Liam Smith is fighting Jesse Vargas, and I think I'll be there. So already January is the slate in January is being filled quite rapidly. So I'm excited about that.
Was the Liam Smith fight officially announced, or did you just kind of give us a scoop here?
I think I might have given you a scoop, but it is something they're talking about. I mean, I don't know if the date has been officially announced, but that's what I heard. So.
Well, we'll look forward to it. And by the way, it looks like on the Bertabayev show on December 6th, we could possibly be working a corner again in the professional ranks. And for those of you who do not know how, before even I was allowed to work corners, I used to have to prepare Russ's bucket. And if I made any single mistake in the preparation of the bucket, I would hear about it.
Correct.
One of the sayings you told me once, and at least you used to bring buckets. There's still some people in the corner, in professional corners, who come in with almost nothing. Hey, Russ, can I borrow this? You got extra pay? You got this? So the rule was, and you used to always tell me, there's multiple ways of doing something, but there's always a best way of doing something.
The one way of doing it right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the same thing for the bucket. We won't tell all the secrets, but I look forward to the show in Montreal. There hasn't been a big boxing event at the Bell Center in a while. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it in December.
Yeah, that's going to be a great fight that we're going to have to break down. Marcus Brown versus better buy it for the light heavyweight championship of the world. Hell of a fight, that. Hell of a fight. Hell of a fight.
I think so. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it with Scully also in the next few weeks. So take it easy to us. It flew by. Another edition of Calling Russ Anber. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll be back next week.
Talk later, Matt. Thanks.
Take care.